A hungry little boy looked up at a billionaire lady and whispered, "Do you also cry from hunger?" She froze, because behind his words was a pain she knew all too well. The pain of losing her only son. What happened next will break your heart, and heal it at the same time. The evening sun was slowly sinking behind the skyline of Dallas, its golden light stretching across glass towers and sprawling avenues. The city was alive with movement. Cars humming down wide streets, businessmen hurrying past coffee shops, and women clutching shopping bags filled with luxuries many could only dream of. But at the edge of all this glittering wealth, where the pavements grew cracked and shadows stretched longer, sat a little boy whose life had been shaped by hunger and absence. His name was Jabari, barely 9 years old. His frame was thin, his clothes torn, and his eyes carried a weight far too heavy for a child. Jabari's mother had passed away 2 winters ago, leaving him with a father who struggled with low-paying labor jobs and long nights of exhaustion. But when his father was injured in an accident at a construction site and never came home, Jabari's world collapsed entirely. He had no one. Only the streets, only hunger, only the silent tears he cried at night when no one could hear. That evening, he sat by the entrance of an upscale restaurant, the kind where chandeliers sparkled and laughter spilled out through heavy glass doors. He had chosen that place not because he hoped for scraps, but because he wanted to watch people. People who lived in a world so far removed from his own. He whispered to himself, a habit he had picked up since loneliness became his only companion. "Do you also cry from hunger?" he murmured into the fading light, as if asking the sky, as if asking the strangers who passed by with perfume and fine suits. The question wasn't directed at anyone, and yet, fate carried it to the ears of a woman stepping out of a sleek black car. Her presence commanded attention, not because of extravagance, but because of the aura of quiet authority she carried. Her name was Alice Walton, daughter of a billionaire family, a woman whose wealth could buy cities and whose influence stretched across nations. Yet, her heart carried scars deeper than any fortune could heal. Only a month had passed since she had buried her only son, William. His death had been sudden, cruel, and left her home hollow, her nights restless, her soul aching. When Alice heard Jabari's fragile voice, something inside her stopped. She turned, expecting perhaps an adult beggar, but instead she found 2 dark, solemn eyes staring up at her. They were not just eyes of a child. They were mirrors of grief. Hunger was there, yes, but so was something more. The look of someone who knew loss, someone who knew the silence of absence. For a moment, Alice froze. She had spent the past weeks surrounded by condolences, flowers, and polite words that meant nothing. People told her time would heal, but they did not see her alone in the early morning, clutching her son's favorite toy, aching for just one more laugh, one more embrace. And now here was this boy, ragged and frail, asking a question that pierced deeper than any she had heard. "Do you also cry from hunger?" Alice knelt down, her designer heels clicking against the stone, her carefully tailored coat brushing the ground. She looked at him closely, her eyes softening, though her voice trembled as she asked, "What did you say?" Jabari swallowed hard. He had not expected her to hear. He lowered his gaze, embarrassed, but then his small voice broke through again, trembling with honesty. I cry when I am hungry. Do you also cry?" It was such an innocent question, so painfully honest, that Alice felt her chest tighten. She thought of her son, who never knew hunger, who never sat in the cold waiting for kindness. But she also thought of her own tears. Tears not from hunger of the stomach, but hunger of the heart. Hunger for her boy's voice. Hunger for his presence. And for the first time in weeks, she let herself admit it aloud. "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I cry too." The boy's head lifted in surprise. Children rarely expected honesty from adults, especially adults dressed in wealth. His eyes widened, and for a brief second, something unspoken passed between them. Two souls, divided by the world, connected by grief. The chauffeur stood nearby, awkward and uneasy, unused to seeing his employer kneeling in the dust before a beggar child. But Alice ignored the stares. She reached into her purse and pulled out a silk handkerchief, pressing it gently into Jabari's small hand. It was absurd, almost laughable. What good was silk to a starving child? Yet the gesture was more than material. It was human. It was recognition. "What is your name?" she asked softly. "Jabari," he answered, his voice barely audible. Alice nodded slowly. "Jabari, do you have anyone? Family? Someone to care for you?" The boy shook his head. His silence told her everything. Alice's heart clenched. For all her fortune, for all her access to everything life could offer, she could not bring her son back. But in that moment, as she looked at Jabari, she realized life had placed before her another soul on the edge of despair. A child asking not for riches, but for dignity, for presence, for someone to see him. The city lights flickered on, glowing against the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed from rooftop bars, and music floated through the night. But in that small corner of Dallas, time seemed to still. A billionaire lady and a beggar boy sat in the same silence, bound not by wealth or poverty, but by tears that came from places deeper than hunger. And as the first stars pierced the evening sky, Alice made a quiet vow to herself. She would not walk away. Alice stood there for a long moment, the cold evening air brushing against her face. She had come to the restaurant that night to meet an old friend, hoping that conversation might distract her from the gnawing emptiness in her chest. But now, she no longer cared about the dinner waiting inside. Something far greater had pulled her attention to the boy in front of her. "Jabari," she repeated softly, as though trying to imprint the name in her mind. There was something powerful in saying a child's name out loud. It gave them presence, it gave them value, it acknowledged that they were not invisible. Too many people had walked past Jabari as though he were part of the pavement, a shadow in their busy lives. But Alice could not look away. She reached into her handbag again, this time pulling out a small wallet. From it, she removed several bills and held them toward him. Jabari's eyes darted nervously. Experience had taught him that gifts from strangers were rarely simple. He had seen others on the street accept money, only to be shouted at, insulted, or accused of theft. He hesitated, his thin fingers curling tightly against his chest. "Take it," Alice urged gently. "Buy yourself something warm to eat." Still, Jabari didn't move. His eyes searched hers, testing if there was cruelty hidden behind kindness. When he finally reached out and accepted the bills, he whispered a word so small it nearly disappeared into the night. "Thank you." Alice nodded, but she didn't move to stand. She stayed there at his level, unwilling to let the moment end as a simple transaction. Something inside her insisted that this boy was not meant to vanish back into the shadows. "Where do you sleep, Jabari?" she asked quietly. The child looked down at the pavement. "Sometimes behind the bus station. Sometimes near the church when the guards don't chase me away." He shrugged as though it were nothing, as though being pushed from corner to corner was normal. And for him, it was. Alice's throat tightened. She had spent the last month mourning in a mansion where the walls echoed with silence, surrounded by servants, security, and luxury. Yet here was a boy who slept wherever the night would allow him, carrying hunger like a constant companion. Something in her broke. She thought of William, her son, whose bed remained untouched, his room preserved exactly as he left it. She thought of how she longed for just one chance to protect him again, to make him safe, to tuck him in with a story before bed. And though William was gone, Jabari was here, fragile and trembling, and perhaps, just perhaps, God had led her to him for a reason. "Jabari," she said softly, "would you like to come with me? Just for tonight. Somewhere safe, somewhere warm." The boy's eyes widened, a storm of emotions flashing through them. Fear, hope, doubt. Strangers had never spoken to him this way before. The streets had taught him suspicion, had taught him to survive by trusting no one. But something about Alice's voice carried weight. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was something deeper, something he didn't even know how to name. "I don't want trouble," he whispered nervously. "People they don't like me near them." Alice's heart ached at his words. She reached out, very slowly, careful not to frighten him, and touched his hand. "You're not trouble," she said firmly. "You're a child, and you deserve better than this." Her chauffeur shifted uneasily, unsure of how to respond. It was not his place to question her, but he had never seen Alice Walton speak with such rawness. He opened the car door silently, waiting for her command. Jabari hesitated, torn between fear of betrayal and the desperate longing for warmth. His stomach ached with hunger, his small body shivered in the night. And in Alice's voice he heard something he had never heard before: truth. Slowly, carefully, he nodded. Alice stood, guiding him toward the car. Passers-by glanced curiously, some whispering, some frowning, but Alice ignored them all. Let them talk. Let them wonder why the richest woman in the city was escorting a ragged boy into her luxury car. None of that mattered. What mattered was that Jabari no longer sat alone on the pavement. Inside the car, the leather seats felt foreign beneath him. He sat rigid, afraid to move, afraid to soil something so perfect. Alice noticed his stiffness and placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're safe here," she murmured. "Just breathe." The ride to her estate felt like a journey between worlds. Jabari stared out of the window as neon lights gave way to wide avenues, then to manicured lawns and high gates. He had never seen such places before, where houses looked like castles and gardens stretched endlessly. To him, it was another planet. When the car stopped before her mansion, Jabari froze. The sheer size of the house overwhelmed him. He had grown used to corners, alleys, cramped spaces where he could curl up unnoticed. This house, with its towering pillars and glowing windows, seemed almost unreal. Alice gently guided him inside. The marble floors, the chandeliers, the smell of polished wood, all of it pressed against him with an intensity he could not explain. But what struck him most was the silence. A silence so heavy it seemed to carry grief within its walls. Alice noticed his nervous glances and forced a smile. "Come," she said softly. "You must be hungry." In the kitchen, servants looked on in confusion as their employer walked in with a beggar boy. Whispers flickered, but Alice silenced them with a single look. She asked the chef to prepare something warm. Simple food, not extravagant, something Jabari could eat without fear. As the meal was placed before him, Jabari hesitated again, staring at the plate as though it might vanish. Slowly, carefully, he picked up the fork and tasted. The moment the food touched his tongue, tears welled in his eyes. It was the first time in weeks he had eaten something more than scraps from bins. He tried to hide his tears, but Alice saw. She placed her hand over his small one and whispered, "It's all right. You don't have to hide here." For the first time since her son's death, Alice felt something stir inside her. A flicker of purpose, a spark of life. She could not heal her loss, but perhaps she could heal his. And as Jabari ate, trembling with both hunger and relief, Alice knew this was only the beginning of a journey neither of them had expected. The night was long, but neither Alice nor Jabari slept easily. After the meal, she had shown him to a guest room, one of many in her mansion that had remained unused for years. The bed was vast, dressed in soft sheets and heavy blankets, yet Jabari sat at the edge, unsure whether he was allowed to sink into its comfort. He clutched the silk handkerchief she had given him earlier, as though it were a key to this strange new world. For Alice, sleep had been elusive since her son's passing. The silence of the house haunted her, each creak reminding her of what was missing. But that night, she found herself listening for something else. The quiet breathing of a child down the hall. It was not her William, but it was a life she could protect, and that thought gave her a fragile kind of peace. When morning came, Jabari rose before the sun, instinctively cautious. Years of surviving on the streets had trained him to wake before anyone could drive him away. But as he tiptoed through the hallway, he noticed the walls lined with photographs. Family portraits of smiling faces, elegant gatherings, and most of all, a boy with blonde hair and bright eyes. William, Jabari paused, staring at the images, sensing the absence even without knowing the story. Alice found him there, standing silently before the photographs. She approached quietly, her voice low. "That was my son." Jabari turned, unsure if he had done something wrong. He looks happy," he said softly. Alice's throat tightened. He was my whole world." Her eyes glistened, but she held his gaze. "I lost him not long ago. That's why the house feels so empty." The boy looked down, his small fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "I lost my mama," he whispered. "And then my daddy too. Sometimes, I think maybe I did something wrong. Maybe that's why they're gone." Alice's heart broke at his words. She knelt down, cupping his face gently. "No, Jabari, you did nothing wrong. Life can be cruel, unbearably so. But their love for you was real, and nothing can erase that." For a moment, the two stood in a silence that was not heavy, but shared. Two wounded souls recognizing each other's scars. Later that day, Alice decided Jabari needed more than food and shelter. He needed dignity. She called her driver and instructed him to take them into the city. Jabari was hesitant, afraid of returning to streets where he had been invisible for so long. But Alice reassured him. "Today you walk with me. No one will ignore you." They stopped at a clothing store first. The staff, accustomed to serving only the wealthy, glanced suspiciously at Jabari in his ragged clothes. One attendant whispered to another, the curl of a smirk on his lips. Alice caught it instantly. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut the air. The attendant stiffened. "And no, ma'am. Of course not." "Good," Alice replied coldly. "Because this boy will be treated with the same respect you would give me. Do I make myself clear?" Jabari's eyes widened. No one had ever defended him like that, not with such authority. For the first time, he felt the weight of dignity being placed upon his shoulders. Clothes were chosen carefully, not extravagant suits, but simple, comfortable outfits that fit him properly. When Jabari looked at himself in the mirror, he almost didn't recognize the boy staring back. He stood a little straighter, shoulders lifted, as though new clothes carried not just fabric, but a new sense of belonging. From there, Alice took him to a small bookstore. She picked out children's novels, picture books, and a worn copy of The Little Prince. "This was William's favorite," she explained, her voice soft. "He used to say it made him feel less alone." She placed it in Jabari's hands. "I think it belongs with you now." Jabari held the book carefully, as though it were a treasure. He couldn't read well, not yet, but the gesture made him feel seen in a way he hadn't before. By afternoon, word had begun to spread in Dallas. The press whispered of Alice Walton, the billionaire, walking openly with a black beggar boy at her side. Some praised her compassion. Others criticized her, calling it a publicity stunt or foolish sentiment. But Alice ignored them all. She knew this was not for the world's approval. This was for Jabari, and for herself. That evening, back at the mansion, Alice called her lawyer. She asked about guardianship, about what it would take to make Jabari more than a guest, more than a passing act of charity. Her lawyer hesitated, reminding her of the complications, the scrutiny that would follow, the barriers of race, class, and bloodlines. Alice listened patiently and then said with finality, "I don't care about barriers. I care about this boy." Jabari overheard fragments of the conversation, though he didn't fully understand. What he did understand was that for the first time in years, someone wanted him, not as a burden, not as an inconvenience, but as a person worth fighting for. That night, when Alice tucked him into bed, Jabari whispered, "Why me? You're rich. You could help anyone. Why me?" Alice sat on the edge of the bed, her voice trembling. "Because when I looked into your eyes, I saw the same pain I carry, and I knew I couldn't walk away. Maybe it's not me saving you, Jabari. Maybe it's you saving me." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time, they were not just from hunger or sorrow. They were from hope. He reached out and held her hand tightly, afraid to let go, afraid that when morning came it would all vanish like a dream. Alice bent forward, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Sleep now. Tomorrow, we begin again." As the night deepened, the mansion no longer felt like a hollow shell. It breathed again, not with the laughter of William, but with the fragile beginnings of something new. Two broken hearts, finding in each other the courage to keep beating. Days turned into weeks, and weeks began to weave into months. The boy who once huddled on cold pavements slowly grew into a child who laughed again, though his laughter was still cautious, as if afraid it might be taken from him. Jabari learned to eat without shame, to sleep without fear of being chased, to walk through doors that once seemed forbidden. But more than comfort, what he gained in Alice's home was dignity. The simple, profound gift of being seen as human. Alice, too, found herself changing. Grief still lived in her heart like an uninvited guest, but it no longer swallowed her whole. Where silence once echoed in her mansion, there was now the sound of small footsteps racing down hallways, the rustle of pages as Jabari struggled through his books, the quiet hum of a child rediscovering what it meant to live. She still mourned William. She always would. But caring for Jabari gave her grief a direction, a way to honor her son's memory by protecting another life. Not everyone understood. At charity galas, whispers followed her. Why him? Why not through an organization, a foundation? Others asked. Some murmured with disdain, others with thinly veiled prejudice. She's tarnishing the family name, they sneered. Alice heard it all, but her resolve never wavered. To her, Jabari was not a project or a cause. He was a child who deserved more than pity, who deserved a future. And every time she saw him smile shyly at the dinner table, every time he looked up from his book with pride at mastering a new word, she knew she had made the only choice her heart could bear. One afternoon, Jabari sat with her in the garden, the sun warming their shoulders. He had grown bolder in asking questions, and this time his voice carried a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "Miss Alice, do you think people will ever stop looking at me like I don't belong?" The question pierced her. She set aside her teacup and looked at him, meeting his gaze. "Jabari, the world can be cruel, especially to boys who look like you. Some people carry prejudice like a disease in their hearts. But you must never let their blindness make you doubt your worth. You belong, not because I say so, not because of money, not because of where you live, but because you are human, because you are you." Jabari lowered his eyes. "Sometimes, I still feel like that boy on the street. Invisible." Alice reached out, lifting his chin gently. "You are not invisible to me, and you will not be invisible to the world. Not if I can help it. The world tried to break you, Jabari, but you are stronger than it knows." Her words planted something deep inside him, a seed of pride, of resilience. It was not long after that Alice arranged for Jabari to attend school. On his first day, he clung to her hand, nervous of the stares, of the whispers. Other children came from wealthy families, their shoes polished, their lunches packed with care. Jabari felt small again, like an intruder. But when he saw Alice watching him from the gates, nodding with steady reassurance, he found the courage to take his first step into the classroom. The months that followed were not easy. Jabari faced prejudice from some, kindness from others. He stumbled over his words, struggled with lessons, fought the old instincts of survival that whispered he didn't belong. Yet he persisted, and Alice stood beside him at every turn, reading with him at night, celebrating every small victory, reminding him again and again that his story was not one of shame, but of strength. As seasons changed, so did Jabari. He grew taller, his face fuller, his eyes brighter. The boy who once whispered to the night, "Do you also cry from hunger?" was now a boy who could stand in front of his class and read aloud with confidence. Hunger no longer defined him. Alice watched these changes with quiet awe. She knew she could never replace William, and she never tried. But she also knew that love was not limited to what had been lost. It could grow again, in new forms, in unexpected places. Jabari did not erase her grief, but he gave it meaning. Through him, she could honor the love she still carried for her son. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blazed with colors, Jabari turned to Alice with a question that caught her off guard. "Do you think my mama can see me now?" Alice felt her throat tighten, but she smiled softly. "Yes, Jabari. I believe she can, and I believe she is proud of you." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "And your boy, William, do you think he can see you too?" Alice closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the stillness. "I hope so, and I hope he knows that loving you doesn't mean I've forgotten him. It means I carry him with me, through you. You both are part of my heart now." The boy leaned against her, and for the first time in years, Alice felt a wholeness she thought she had lost forever. It was different, yes, but it was real. As nights settled over the estate, the world outside continued with its noise, its judgments, its blindness. But within those walls sat a billionaire woman and a once-forgotten boy, bound not by wealth or pity, but by love born out of shared loss and the courage to see each other's humanity. Jabari had found a home, and Alice had found a reason to breathe again. And though life would never be free from sorrow, neither of them cried alone anymore. If this story touched your heart, then stay with us. Like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real and inspiring stories. Your one like and subscribe means the world to us.